ADCC has really been the highlight of my competitive jiu-jitsu career, even though the way that it panned out in 2011 was pretty frustrating, honestly. You know, my opponent in the quarterfinal got called for stalling 3 times. They didn't penalize him, and they gave him 2 points for something in the beginning of the match that it was sketchy at best, and that was the 2 points that won it. I ended up in a bad situation towards the end where I ended up just shooting a blind low single because I was down 2-0. So even if I stood up to wrestle, and I feel like I would have a good chance of out wrestling that person, he would just sit down, take the -1, and the match would be over. So it was one of those. It was a frustrating way to go out, particularly with the amount of investment they put into ADCC 2011. But honestly, that is my favorite tournament that I've ever competed in, and it's been such an honor to compete for ADCC in the past. I was invited for 2013, but it was at 66 kilos, and it was in Beijing, and I just remember thinking, man, I don't want to fly that far to be that little. If I were to be invited at 77, up at like JT Torres, Kron Gracie's weight, those guys, I would jump at the opportunity. I walk around at about 158, 160 pounds, so I'll be a little bit small, but I'd rather be a little bit smaller and feel good than do what I ended up having to do for ADCC 2011. Because in between 2009, when it used to be set up like a fight with the 24-hour weigh-in, which is effectively 145 pounds, which is super easy for me to make, which is why I fight there at MMA. And in between 2009 and 2011, they changed the weigh-in structure to mat side, and that was, to call that stressful was an understatement. I remember wondering how the heck some of the guys made weight, because I got there and I felt like fragile, like that small and skinny. And I remember looking at some other people and like, man, I must have screwed this up or something, because everybody else looks, 1, diesel, and 2, fine. But anyway, it was just losing the weight for that was definitely rough. I don't think I cheated on my diet for 3 months straight, and I ended up getting down to 138 pounds walking around. And I mean, I'm about 5'10" and a half or something, and again, comfortably 160 pounds. And that was just because I was so nervous I was having nightmares like 3 times a week about missing the weight, and which actually happened to one of the guys in my weight class, and ended up making it a kind of interesting for how everything played out. Because I remember Haniyaya, well, it's got to be tough too, because again, he's coming from far away. These are things like that, and they weighed us in on Friday, I guess, with an unofficial weigh-in just for kicks, and but you didn't get to actually get on the physical scale that you would be judged on until you're about to walk onto the mat. So I just remember thinking that, oh man, there's no way I'm going to miss weight. I'll do whatever it takes. So I got so low, particularly because it's not like you're getting down to the weight and then just competing in your backyard. You've got to keep that weight off for a couple days as you fly around the world. And anyway, long and short of it was, it sucked. And I just, I remember I'd never been to the tournament before where I was just like, man, can I just fight so we can get this over with? And I just really don't feel like that was a good mental position to be in. So I feel like that it was hard to perform my best. And again, any other issues that I have or gripe or whatever aside, I just would hope to feel a little bit better, and then just wrestle. There's people that are tough at any weight, no question, and super tough really. So there's no easy matches at ADCC. So I would rather feel a little bit better knowing what I know now, and compete the next weight class up. Not to mention I'd be excited to compete against some of the guys from that higher weight who I probably wouldn't have otherwise run into. And from an MMA perspective and training-wise, ADCC is just not that much of a departure from things. If you recall, Vinny Magalhaes, won ADCC when he was training for MMA, did other things. Vinny's a super dangerous grappler, tough guy. But when you're talking about how valuable wrestling is under that rule set, how valuable escapes are under that rule set and whatnot, and the fact that I can read the knee, I can footlock in whatever way that I want. I just feel that it's much more in line with what's going on for me right now than gi jiu-jitsu or even let's say the no-gi worlds or something like that. And as a result, I would absolutely leap at the opportunity. So ADCC, if you would consider it, I'm in. Absolutely. I think certainly to a certain extent, I feel I've personally shown that it's applicable on the highest level, and we've got plenty of other guys that have used it with good success as well. I mean, Vinny Magalhaes, someone I mentioned earlier, is obviously, he might have even heel hooked Buchecha from there. And I think anything that works on Buchecha is valid as far as I'm concerned. But, I guess you look at people that have used the 50-50 successfully at a high level, the Meow brothers, who I'm a big fan of, very tough kids. And, you know, I've seen Keenan Cornelius use it, finish a heel hook at, not this past Metamoris, but the one before when he submitted Kevin Casey. Bruno Frazato, a lot of the Atos guys have always been successful from there. But, you know, when you take away the heel hooks, you take away the leg locks, you have to be legitimately good in the position to make it work. The leg locks, don't get me wrong, that adds a whole other layer of skill that makes it even better in my mind. But when you have the leg lock position available to you, it works in gi, no gi, or rather, you know, well, I guess you could, definitely works in the gi if you're allowed to heel hook people. So I guess if you're in the new Hickson Gracie tournament or whatever, I was looking at that, you could heel hook people in the 50-50, I think. But it absolutely works at all levels, and it just doesn't take as much leg dexterity and understanding of the position to make things work, because you can force the other guy to move so much more easily by attacking his feet, and that generates, you know, scrambles and positions of their own. But you know, I've just seen so much success, you know, between, you know, myself, the Bruno Frazato, the Mendes brothers, the Miaos, guys like Keenan, you know, Vinny, even people that don't use it well, you know, have had success. I've watched it used in MMA. I mean, Toquinho, I've seen finish people from there. Granted, these, you know, if he gets a hold of your foot, God help you. But I see, you know, Imanari is someone that's used it successfully in MMA. But even again, these are all guys that are very, very adept footlock wise. In my mind, the mark of a good technique is not only something that can be used by a master, but how many people have been knocked out by the straight right hand by someone that really doesn't throw it that well, to be honest. And that doesn't mean it's not effective and that I want to get hit by it or something. But the idea is, you look at, for instance, the world's best blue belt is not that good. I mean, not that he's not tough, but compared to the world's best black belt, you know, I don't think that Rodolfo Vieira is staying up late nights worrying about that guy because of the experience gap. But you look at jiu-jitsu and you say, how effective is this? And it's incredibly effective, because you don't have to be a master in order to make things work. So is Aikido real? I think so, probably, but that it's such a high level thing, you'd have to have such an incredibly fine level of control to make it work. It's significantly less valuable for the average person, and significantly less valuable, speaking for me personally, as a result, because I'm not at the level where I can make that kind of stuff work reliably. But again, the jab, hey, it works for everybody. The only difference between the jab and the 50-50 and other things like that is, when I screw up the jab, people blame me. When people screw up the 50-50, they blame the position. Now, here, the other thing is, you know, I hear a lot of complaining and whining in the 50-50 about how people stall and this and that, and sometimes people do stall, no question. And sometimes it's hard to watch. It's just ugly. If people aren't really sure what to do, they'll latch onto each other, or there'll be a lot of pretend going on, like when you'd watch two guys in the 50-50 both going for toe holds, making faces at the referee, you know, being like, oh, I'm really trying hard, and when we know neither guy taps to the footlock, you know, in that position, if you have flexible feet, that's stalling. But that's really more a function of the refereeing than anything else. I have to understand that the way that I set the rules is going to inform, you know, the competitor's decisions. And that was something that speaking personally, one of the reasons that I liked fighting MMA is, you know, when I like fighting in general, that's when I got into it. I got into martial arts for in the first place. But I remember, you know, certain people coming up to me and saying, wow, I can't believe that you're doing all right in MMA. And I said, well, out of curiosity, why is that? And they said, well, I thought you were going to pull inverted guard. And I'm like, why? And they said, well, that's what you do in jiu-jitsu. I said, yes, in jiu-jitsu, there's all sorts of things that I would do because the rules reward them, and there's other dangers that aren't there, like getting hit in the face, that would allow me to do this, that, and the other. And I think that any good competitor is going to adjust his or her strategy to tailor it to the rules and to the scenario. I'll be honest, the best jiu-jitsu guys tend to compete in the IBJJF. So if you want to say you're the best, if you want to be the champion, you need to win those events. It's very important, you know, unless you're going to do no-gi only and then ADCC. And the level of the no-gi worlds, while it's coming up significantly, I don't believe it's comparable to ADCC by any stretch. And not to mention, the more whittled down the rules are, you know, the more specific the rules are, the more they say, oh, you can't do this, this, or this. I'd say the less important the title is in my mind, you know, just as an athlete and as a martial artist. But it's hard to keep up with the IBJJF's rule system. No one, you know, asked my opinion on it before they were, you know, messing around with it. And I also get curious. I said, who actually is signing off on all these rule changes? I'm not sure. Maybe it's a democratic type of thing, but then again, maybe it's not. And I think one of the problems that we see, like in international judo, is, I mean, obviously international judoka are at a very high level, and it's a phenomenal sport. It's a beautiful art. But you look at, you know, everything's disallowed now. And yeah, there's stalling and there's this and that, but there was also a certain function of certain countries or certain people getting very good at things and then them being disallowed. And again, I can only speculate as to why that may be, but you know, the more I watch Jiu-Jitsu evolve, the more I see the better guys, the top guys becoming even better and even sharper than they ever were because of the competition, not because of the rules, but just because the competition is getting more refined and stronger and there's more people involved. But I see less and less of a martial art and more of a very finely tuned sport. Knee reaping is one of the stupidest things I've ever even heard of. Like, I know exactly what it is to tear someone's knee. It's not something that I would relish doing, but if you don't tap, it's on you. It's not on me. In class, it's on me. Your safety obviously is my #1 concern. In a competition, if you put me in an arm lock and I don't tap, no one blames you for breaking my arm. Again, the second I tap, you let go, but I control my own level of safety. I've seen way more people get hurt with kimuras and, you know, strange guillotine type things than I have from leg locks, honestly. And you know, the more that I see things in IBJJF, I actually run into people that literally freak out now if a foot starts to pass across their hip. And again, this is, I'm just saying, oh, like, I know this guy, and like, it's anecdotal and everything. But the idea is still, you'll have people like, whoa, easy, easy. And I'll just be watching this occur, because this hasn't actually happened to me personally, but I've watched this occur in class, or, you know, once actually twice at my academy, where I pulled the guy aside and be like, just so you know, that's not gonna hurt your knee. But I've seen it elsewhere where people will literally get into like, I'm going to finger wag at you and tell you how close you came to hurting someone. And as someone that's also finished a lot of footlocks, I've also had footlocks get away from me. And I know how difficult it can be to finish, you know, a footlock on someone if the circumstances aren't correct and if things aren't really locked in there properly. There's no magic position that breaks your leg, and there's no magic position that breaks your arm. If you wrap me up in a leg lock and I start doing backflips, I'm an idiot. And if I hurt my knee, it's my own dang fault. What I would, in the past, I would have speculated, I would have said, if I were outside looking in, and of course this has been addressed by a number of competitors who have gotten to very high level in both wrestling and in footlocks, I would look at the rules and I would say, Brazilian competitors tend to not be very strong in this area and this area. It's interesting that those things are disallowed. Now, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I'm not sure. But the idea is, if you open up the rules, it becomes a little bit more interesting. Wrestling becomes much more valuable. A lot of footlock positions become much more valuable. Speaking personally, I'm significantly tougher to beat. You know, I feel much more effective when I can open up my entire game to be able to move you around and leg lock and all that other stuff, and not just for the finish, but for control as well. I'd say that there are plenty of people that could say the same. I'd say that some of those rules, aside from the fact that they're just ridiculously abused, and I've seen plenty of cheating where I drag your foot across, and there couldn't be less martial art about that from a rules perspective, and there couldn't be less scumbaggery about that from a competitiveness perspective. But you know, I'd say that it hides deficiencies in grapplers, and what I don't want to see is a sport, is the art that I came up in and the art that I love being really kind of neutered on a certain level, and having a rack of people that can't defend footlocks, can't apply footlocks, don't even know how they work, can't wrestle because you can sit down. Because again, speaking personally, I was one of the guys that the rules didn't protect me in footlocks. I was heel hooking people when I was a blue belt. I wasn't great, but I was heel hooking people. But the rules protected me for a long time before I learned how to wrestle. And I'm obviously not going to be, you know, representing any countries anytime soon. But I feel very comfortable, you know, wrestling, and I feel like I can out-wrestle the vast majority of high-level jiu-jitsu players that I come across. And what does that say to me? One, that wrestling is valuable, but two, that obviously, you know, the level of wrestling and jiu-jitsu, even though it's improving because we're getting guys involved, it can oftentimes be pretty low because, you know, again, I work on my wrestling a lot and I practice a lot, but I'm certainly nothing to write home about. So long and short of it is, I really would love to see the IBJJF go a different direction, and I'd say we need way fewer rules about what's legal and way more rules about what you're not allowed to do in terms of disengaging, and more careful refereeing, because a jiu-jitsu player, particularly, let's say we're looking at you or I, you know, as a martial artist, if your ability to win a fight is contingent upon getting the fight to the ground, you better be able to do it. And you know what? Two good ways to do it are footlocks. You can get the fight to the ground by dragging people down with them, and wrestling. And I don't know, it's just tough. And I hate to be all like cliche and again point out some random false person that I'm creating, but I can't tell you how often I encounter now guys that are like purple, brown belts, that got their belts pretty quickly sometimes too, which is strange to me because a lot of people seem to get promoted very quickly these days. But no wrestling, no footlocks, sit there, try to berimbolo you the whole time. And the berimbolo is an awesome move. It's a great move. It's what an incredible innovation of jiu-jitsu that it was and is. But everything else isn't there. And again, I know I have plenty of holes in my own game, so I'm not saying, oh, ha, 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 I'm so great. But it's just something, it's a trend that I've noticed that I really would love to see addressed, you know, by the governing body to try to encourage people to be something different. Because the last thing I want to see is, you know, is when someone says, I remember when I was 5, 6 years ago, someone, here's your jiu-jitsu black belt. They're like, whoa, probably a tough guy. I think that's probably going to go away, and I really wouldn't want to see that.